Happy Wealth Wednesday. So excited to have you here and to talk to us about how to also be able to invest even if you have student debt. I am such a fan of what you're building and so excited to hear about your journey and get some tips and tricks on how to consider your investment portfolio a big part of your strategy, even if you're struggling with student loans or have that as part of your life. So thank you for joining. I would love to get sort of an introduction about you and how and why you got into this particular space.
So I'm Pamela Martinez and I'm a co-founder and CTO of Snowball Wealth. And what we do is provide personalized guidance to help people pay off debt and build wealth, especially for the 30 million women in America with student debt. And before this, I was in engineering. I was an engineering leader at a few startups. I think for me, this was like a pretty personal problem. So I'm an immigrant here. I grew up in a working class family. And the first real exposure to wealth didn't come until I was in college at Stanford. And then after graduating, I really realized the power of money. Like my first full-time job, I was making 2 to 3x what my parents were making. I had to learn and figure things out on my own. And, I think along the last 5 to 10 years, I think it's been a journey of helping my family with their debt, helping my partner and boyfriend with his debt, and me figuring things out. For me, I actually didn't know anything about investing until someone at work brought it up. And, I think at that point, I really thought that just because I had a full-time job and I was making, over $100,000 in my salary, I thought that meant that I had made it. I think after a while, I really started thinking about what happened later. Graduate from a good college and you can still feel pretty stuck financially. Mm-hmm. So that's when I jumped in with Tanya, my co-founder, who also graduated with student debt, to really help people figure out this journey, because it takes an average of 20 years to pay off your debt. So it's not like you can just jump in, pay it off and get it over with. I mean, some people definitely can, but I think on average, this is something that you live with. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to learn, how do you manage that? How do you get your debt into a manageable state so that you can move on with your life and not put some of these bigger milestones behind you? For us, we're really focusing on kind of women, and I think a lot of intersectionality with BIPOC women as well as other people of color. And what we're really thinking about is people who are their first in their families to build wealth. And for us, I think one of the big things that we're doing and we're really focusing on is really trying to move away from having debt be stigmatized. Right now, there's a lot of products that help people to start building wealth, but a lot of this wealth tech doesn't really face the reality that a lot of people who are starting to invest also might have student loans or personal debt. So we're really coming in with the assumption that you're coming in, you might have a negative net worth when you first start to really focus on your wealth building journey.
What do you think is one of the most exciting things you've learned or that you would want others to know?
Women now represent 57% of college enrollment. So I think overall, we're really excited that we're seeing women coming into the workforce, starting to tackle debt and build wealth. And, I do think women are the next generation of wealth builders. So I think we talked about with the college enrollment, women have been outpacing men since early 2000s. So I do think there's a lot of room for opportunity here. And we're having a lot of first time, this is a big generational milestone. I think when it comes to paying off your debt, what are some things that I wish I had known earlier, or I feel like a lot of people should know earlier? I think really paying attention to your interest rate is something that, I think is really important to do early on. More than anything, I think it's really coming up with a plan. What do you want to do with your student debt? Having a plan really depends on how much you graduated with, how much you're making, what kind of big term milestones you might have. If you want to pay off your debt as fast as possible, something that is key is really lowering your interest rate, if you can refinance and if you're eligible for that, and increasing those monthly payments if you can afford to do that. That's what will save you the most amount of money and also allow you to pay it off a lot faster.
How do you think about good versus bad debt and increasing those monthly payments? What are some good strategies you've seen?
So I think one of the things that we talk about a lot, there is a lot of nuance when it comes to student debt. If you're really trying to pay off your student debt and decide on, do I start investing or not? We like to talk about what's high interest rate, what's medium interest rate, and what's low interest. So a great tactic is to think about, do I have something over 7%? If your student debt is over 7%, it's probably a good idea to start paying that down before you start investing, especially if it's a lot higher. Some Parent Plus loans or some private loans might be pretty high. If you have that kind of high student debt, there's a few options. One, you can try to pay it off as quickly as possible, or two, you could consolidate or refinance that into something that's a lower interest rate. And overall, I would say when you graduate from school, usually most people from undergrad will have like at least 4 loans with 4 different interest rates. So really sitting down and looking at what is the breakup of your loans and which loans are high, which loans are medium, which ones are low. And when it comes to paying down your debt, there's the avalanche and the snowball method. So these are 2 debt payoff strategies that a lot of people will employ. The avalanche method is targeting and paying off your high interest rate debt first, and you go off, you find the highest one and you pay that off first, and then you move on to the next one. Make your minimum payment on all of the lower student loans, and then try to put all of your extra dollars into the highest ones, and just keep working on that until you kind of like pay them all off. On the other hand, there's the snowball method. This method is all about getting momentum. This is all about like, how do you get rid of a loan as fast as you can? And this method means that you pay off your smallest amounts. I think a lot of people like to do a combination of both. If you have a really small loan that maybe is not the highest interest rate, you might want to just get that paid off so that you don't have to worry about it. And you make a big milestone and you start making a lot of progress versus I would say like the avalanche method, which is strategy where you can save the most amount of money.
Where do people typically go first when they're thinking about refinancing?
So I think when it comes to refinancing, you can come to Snowball, kind of have like a walkthrough that explains what refinancing is, how to think about it, what the steps are. High level, when it comes to refinancing, the most important thing is just like really thinking about like, does refinancing make sense for me or not? Before you jump into refinancing, I think it's really important to know if you have federal student loans, do I want to move away from my federal loans? When it comes to federal student loans, like one of the things that has come up recently is that there is COVID relief right now. So for people with student loans in the federal system, your interest rate is actually set to 0. I think before refinancing, one of the really important things to think about is, do I want to refinance right now if I have federal student loans, or should I just wait and refinance until October 1st? Our recommendation so far has been for people with federal student loans to save up some of that money that they would normally put towards these payments and try to make a lump sum payment right before interest rate goes back up. And then once you are ready to refinance, I think understanding if there are additional, programs or relief, you might not qualify. As of date, there's like no wide scale student loan cancellation that has happened, and payments are still projected to resume October 1st. So let's say you looked at all of this and you're like, yes, I still want to refinance. I think one of the good things about refinancing is that you can do soft pulls. So you can check potential rates with a few different lenders without it hurting your credit score. So, if you're just curious and want to get a sense of like, what kind of rates could I qualify for, you can do just soft pulls and soft checks just to get a sense and get a feel for things. We always recommend that you shop around when you are trying to refinance, getting like 2 to 3 rate, you pick the best option and that you get the lowest rate possible. You can refinance more than once if you're eligible, especially if you have a lot of student debt and it's going to take you a longer amount of time to pay it off. You can do it now, you can do it like a few years later if rates go back down.
Is there a person or a company that really inspires you in this space?
Noom is one of the companies that really inspires us. Even though they're not a fintech company, I love the way that they try to break down something that's like really big and complex. So we really like to think about, how do we break down your finances into something that is like more manageable? How do we help, you take it one day at a time and not get too overwhelmed? I think we've also taken a lot of inspiration from Credit Karma, how they were kind of like the first in this space to like really jump in and give you tools to really help you monitor your credit score and see how that changes over time, and really kind of like get people to understand something that used to be really complex.
And what advice would you give to somebody getting started?
Yeah, so I think if you recently graduated and you have student loans, I think really sitting down and making a plan and really thinking about like what your goals are. And, I think before doing all of this, I think it's important to do a mental check of like, how are you feeling about all of this? Finding community is something that's also really important, not feeling you're on this on your own.
And is there anything else we should know? Anything you'd like to share?
One of the things that like I really care about and I really hope that people can learn and get through is not feeling stuck. If you have debt, you taking it one step at a time, not feeling stuck. You can start investing, you can start saving. You can and will eventually pay that down.
When you do start to get to medium and low interest debt, how do you see people bridging into investing? Are there any tools or resources that you think are good for modeling out those trade-offs?
I think there's a lot of like student loan calculators or debt calculators that you can look at that can help people just get a good sense of how much am I paying in interest over the long run if I'm doing this. I do think there's like a little bit of nuance and personal preference. For a really long time that has been so stigmatized, and there's always this movement of like the debt-free movement of don't have debt, debt is bad, that I think has really been internalized. How do you move beyond that so that you don't feel like you have to pay that down? But if you want to, it's also fine. But I think it's also understanding that don't do it just because you want to be debt free. Trying to put that money into other things that will make money for you, like investing.
Yeah. It's funny because I recently was in a conversation talking to a real estate investor, and real estate developers, almost all their projects and their returns are dependent on leverage, on debt. So without debt, they can't have successful investments in their real estate projects. So I thought that was like kind of a nice reminder for me to be like, oh yeah, debt isn't bad. Debt is actually can be an accelerator of returns when it's used correctly.
A lot of people will try to pay off their student debt before they start paying off their credit card. So I think that's something that I found pretty surprising, or something that we've learned was how do we help people overcome the stigma around student debt and kind of like transition some of that energy into paying off their credit card debt. Student loans are something that a lot of people have. It doesn't have to be stigmatized. It's something that you can pay off as long as you kind of come in and have all of this information around you.
Such a great insight. Pamela, thank you so much for everything that you shared. We'll definitely be staying in touch and sending people your way as things come along. This is so brilliant.
Thank you. And same, I'm really impressed with the, Eve Wealth community and love what you're doing, and, really getting people to start thinking about investing.